What happens when faith becomes a weapon? What happens when a mother's love, the most sacred bond we know, is twisted into a justification for murder? And what do you see when you strip away the mask of a self-proclaimed goddess and force her to face the cold, hard reality of a prison cell? Today, we are not just recounting a story. We are dissecting the very soul of a crime that has captivated and horrified a nation. We're going beyond the headlines to explore the chilling psychology behind one of America's most infamous mothers, Lori Vallow Daybell. This isn't just about her final sentencing in Arizona. This is about the final, shattering confrontation between her grandiose delusions and the raw, unfiltered agony of the lives she destroyed. You are about to hear the voices of the survivors, the family members who fought for years through a nightmare of unimaginable pain. You will hear them speak directly to the monster in the courtroom. You will hear the monster speak back, not with remorse, but with a breathtaking display of narcissistic defiance. And you will witness a judge, with surgical precision, dismantle her entire twisted reality. This is the anatomy of a monster, laid bare, and what we uncover may tell us as much about the dark potential within the human psyche as it does about Lori Vallow herself. Welcome to Crime Fix. For those who have followed this labyrinthine case, the conclusion of Lori Vallow Daybell's legal saga in Arizona marks the final nail in the coffin of her freedom. After a nearly 6-year-long reign of terror that spanned multiple states and left a trail of bodies in its wake, the Doomsday Mom finally faced justice for the conspiracy to murder her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, and the attempted murder of her niece's ex-husband, Brandon Boudreaux. This comes after she was already convicted in Idaho and sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences for the murders of her own 2 children, 16-year-old Tylee Ryan and 7-year-old JJ Vallow, and the murder of her new husband, Chad Daybell's first wife, Tylee Daybell. Now let's be clear, the facts of this case are a matter of public record. A horrifying litany of death. July 2019, Lori's brother Alex Cox shoots and kills her husband Charles Vallow in Chandler, Arizona. The initial claim was self-defense. We now know, and the court has affirmed, this was a cold-blooded, premeditated murder. A murder for which Lori was the architect. September 2019, Lori's children, Tylee and JJ, vanish. Tylee is last seen on September 8th at Yellowstone National Park. JJ is last seen on September 22nd at his school in Rexburg, Idaho. Lori tells people they are safe, that they are with relatives. A cascade of lies to cover an unspeakable truth. October 2019, Tylee Daybell, the wife of Lori's new spiritual guru and lover, Chad Daybell, dies in her sleep. Her death is initially deemed to be from natural causes. Just 2 weeks later, Lori and Chad are married in Hawaii, adorned in celebratory white, while her children are missing, and his wife is barely cold in her grave. October 2019, Alex Cox attempts to murder Brandon Boudreaux, shooting at him from a vehicle. Brandon survives, a crucial witness to the murderous conspiracy. December 2019, the muscle behind the operation, Alex Cox, dies of what are later determined to be natural causes. He takes many secrets to his grave, but the evidence he left behind was overwhelming. June 2020, the horrific search for the children ends. The dismembered, burned remains of Tylee Ryan and the bound, suffocated body of JJ Vallow are found buried in Chad Daybell's backyard. These are the facts, but the why is what plunges us into the abyss. Lori and Chad had concocted a bizarre, self-serving religious ideology. They believed they were chosen leaders in the final days, tasked with gathering the 144,000 for Christ's second coming. More sinisterly, they created a rating system for people's spirits. Those who opposed them, who stood in their way, were labeled dark or zombies, their bodies inhabited by evil spirits. And according to their doctrine, the only way to free the original righteous spirit was to kill the body. This wasn't a religion. It was a license to kill. It was a theological justification for eliminating obstacles. Charles Vallow was an obstacle to her life with Chad and his insurance money. Tylee Daybell was an obstacle to their marriage. And her own children, Tylee and JJ, became obstacles, perhaps because they knew too much, perhaps because they interfered with her divine mission, or perhaps simply because they were a financial and emotional burden. The Arizona sentencing was the final chapter, and it was here that the full, unvarnished emotional toll of Lori's actions was laid bare for the world to see. This wasn't about legal arguments anymore. It was about human devastation. Let's begin with the voice of a son, a young man who lost not one, not two, but three parental figures, and both of his siblings to his own mother's murderous crusade, Colby Ryan.
Colby Ryan's testimony is uniquely tragic. He is Lori's eldest son from her second marriage. He lost his stepfather, Joe Ryan, under suspicious circumstances years earlier. Then, he came to see Charles Vallow as a father figure. Lori took Charles from him. Then she took his sister, Tylee. Then she took his little brother, JJ. Listening to his statement is like listening to the slow, agonizing erosion of a family, piece by piece, until only he remains to bear witness. He recounted the day he learned of Charles's death. Colby Ryan, I was told my father died from a heart attack. I spent the entire day in shock. When I finally went to her house, I discovered the truth. He had been shot and killed in what was labeled self-defense. I saw my sister Tylee fall into my lap, sobbing. My brother JJ was asleep, oblivious. That was the last time I saw my family whole. My life would never be the same. The psychological weight of this moment is immense. Colby is processing the violent death of his father figure, while his mother, the architect of that death, is right there, feigning grief. She is performing the role of the bereaved wife while knowing she orchestrated the entire event. This is the hallmark of a malignant narcissist, the ability to wear a mask of normalcy and even victimhood while actively causing devastation. Colby's pain deepens as he describes the subsequent disappearances of his siblings. Colby Ryan, paraphrased from transcript, neither Tylee nor JJ even had time to process their grief before my mother, Lori Vallow, moved them out of state. We didn't know that my sister Tylee only had 60 days left before she would meet the same fate. My sister must have been terrified, confused, broken, and angry. My brother JJ would have only 74 days. He must have been confused, scared, and sad, unable to fully comprehend his feelings. What Colby is articulating is the secondary trauma. It's not just the loss, it's the imagining of their final moments. He is haunted by the fear and confusion his siblings must have felt, betrayed by the one person on earth who was supposed to protect them. Lori didn't just kill her children. She stole their peace, their security, and their trust long before she took their lives. She plunged them into a world of chaos and fear, all while smiling and planning her new life in Hawaii. For Colby, every member of his family was robbed from us in one fell swoop. It's a wound that will never, ever heal. He lost his past and his future simultaneously at the hands of his own mother. Now, let's turn to the voices that became the public face of the fight for justice for JJ Vallow, his grandparents, Kay and Larry Woodcock. Charles Vallow was Kay's brother, and they had a deep bond with their grandson, JJ, who had autism and required special care. They trusted Lori. They begged for information. They were met with lies and silence. Their victim impact statements were not just pleas for justice. They were declarations of war against a force of pure evil. Let's start with Larry Woodcock. His statement was a raw, unfiltered eruption of righteous fury. Larry Woodcock did not mince words. He wasn't there to be eloquent. He was there to be a conduit for pure, unadulterated truth. He looked at the woman who murdered his grandson and his brother-in-law, and he unleashed the pain of 1,000 sleepless nights. Larry Woodcock, I'll say this to you murderers. You are nothing. You are a murderer. You are a narcissist, a psychopath, a delusional killer. I know where you will be for the rest of your life. You'll be in an 8x6 cell. You'll have a steel slab. You'll have a 12x8 stainless steel desk and a toilet. You'll have 23 hours a day in there. I hope you spend the rest of your 23 hours a day regretting your choices. Because that's all it was, murderer. It was your choice. Let's break down the psychological power of what Larry is doing here. He is systematically stripping Lori of her self-proclaimed divinity. In her mind, she is a goddess, a chosen one, above mortal laws. Larry reduces her to her material reality, an inmate in an 8x6 cell. He takes away her power, her mystique, and her grandiosity, and replaces it with the cold, hard facts of her future. A steel slab and a toilet. He is de-deifying her. He then forces her to confront the visceral reality of her actions against JJ Larry Woodcock. You put duct tape on JJ's hands. You wrapped duct tape around his arms. You covered his eyes. And you buried him in 8 inches of dirt. Murderer. May God have mercy on your soul, because that's the only thing in life you've got. And don't count on God where you're going. This is not just an accusation. It's a visualization of horror. He forces everyone in that courtroom, including Lori, to picture that little boy's final, terrifying moments. Bound, blind, and buried by the people he trusted. Larry's words are a weapon of truth, piercing through the layers of religious fantasy Lori has wrapped around herself. He concludes with the ultimate condemnation, a dismissal of her entire spiritual framework. He essentially tells her that the God she claims to serve has no place for her. He calls her out on her lies, her manipulation, her ultimate worthlessness in the face of her crimes. Larry Woodcock, you are a murderer, a murdering master, murderer. You are useless. It's that final word, useless, that is so devastating. For a narcissist obsessed with her own importance and divine mission, being called useless is perhaps the deepest cut of all. It negates her entire existence, and if Larry's statement was a hammer, his wife, Kay Woodcock's, was a scalpel. She performed a masterful, surgical dissection of Lori Vallow's character, exposing the pathetic, attention-seeking woman behind the monstrous facade. Kay Woodcock's statement will be studied for years as a masterclass in confronting a malignant narcissist. She understood Lori's deepest insecurities and targeted them with pinpoint accuracy. She began by honoring her brother, Charles. Kay Woodcock Charles was the backbone of our family. He was steadfast, loyal, and impossibly generous. When you walked into a room with Charles, you felt safe. You felt valued. And that's what makes all of this so unbearable. Because the very person who should have cherished him most, his wife, betrayed him in the most cruel, most calculated way imaginable. By establishing Charles's goodness, she immediately frames Lori's actions as the ultimate betrayal, the ultimate evil. Then, she pivots and addresses Lori directly. The judge tried to stop her from addressing Lori by name, but Kay was undeterred. She knew exactly what she was doing. Kay Woodcock, Miss Texas Beauty Pageant, Wheel of Fortune, extra on Modern Family. What do they all have in common? They are all dates that do not make you famous or idolized. Infamous, yes, but never famous, never idolized. You have spent your entire life chasing cameras, applause, and validation like oxygen. But here you are, exposed, convicted, stripped of the lies you've wrapped yourself in. This is brilliant. Kay is attacking the very core of Lori's narcissistic supply. Lori doesn't see herself as a suburban mom. She sees herself as a star, a divine being destined for greatness. Kay reminds her of her pathetic, failed attempts at fame, reducing her grand narrative to a series of insignificant footnotes. She is telling Lori, you are not special. You are a failure. Kay continues this psychological assault, dismantling Lori's self-perception as a mother and a woman of God. Kay Woodcock, you call yourself a mother, a wife, a woman of God. You are none of these things. You are a liar, a con artist, and a murderer. Did you honestly think you could charm your way out of this? Did you honestly think you are smarter, holier, or more special than everyone else? You are not. You are an ordinary, plain, average-looking, middle-aged woman. Again, ordinary, average-looking. To a vain narcissist like Lori, these words are poison. Kay is holding up a mirror, but it's not the one Lori wants to see. It's the mirror of truth, reflecting a pathetic and empty shell, not a radiant goddess. And then comes the most powerful metaphor of the entire proceeding. Kay Woodcock, the world sees what I saw in 2019 when you abandoned Charles, Colby, Tylee, and JJ to chase the grotesque shadow of a man, Chad Daybell. Lori, have you noticed this courtroom is full? It's not because people admire you. It's because you are a sideshow freak, a murderous carnival act. People come to gawk at the monster who thinks she's a god, a sideshow freak, a murderous carnival act. With these words, Kay Woodcock completely reframes Lori's reality. Lori believes she is the center of a divine drama. Kay tells her no, you are the spectacle in a freak show. People are not here to worship you. They are here to stare in horror and morbid curiosity. She robs Lori of her perceived power and turns her into an object of pity and disgust. It's a verbal execution, and it was breathtaking to witness. The impact statements continued, each one adding another layer to the mountain of suffering Lori created. Brandon Boudreau, the man who survived Alex Cox's assassination attempt, spoke of the lingering trauma and survivor's guilt. Brandon Boudreau: "If this heinous crime had succeeded, my children would be facing a lifetime of grief, robbed of the love, stability, and guidance I provide as their father. I have felt fear, paranoia. I live in constant hypervigilance, loneliness, regret, sadness, depression, anger, heartbreak, and shame. I will never feel safe if she has her freedom." Brandon's words remind us of the ripple effect of these crimes. It's not just the people who died, it's the people who survived, forever scarred. His testimony highlights the concept of familia, the family, as a unit of service and love, and how Lori's actions were an attack on that sacred institution. He lives with the knowledge that his own family, through his ex-wife Melanie, Lori's niece, was complicit in the attempt on his life. The betrayal is almost incomprehensible. After the victims had their say, after the world heard their anguish, the court gave the monster a chance to speak. And what followed was one of the most staggering displays of narcissistic delusion and lack of accountability ever witnessed in a courtroom. Lori Vallow stood up, not to apologize, not to express remorse, but to lecture the court on the failures of the American justice system and to reaffirm her own spiritual superiority. It was a performance of breathtaking arrogance. She began by blaming the system, claiming she was unable to present her side of the story. Lori Vallow: "I soon learned that the rules of law don't allow for that. As a defendant, I was prevented from calling certain witnesses. The founders of this country did not intend for the rules and laws of trial that have been implemented into this justice system to make it so that a defendant cannot defend themselves. This is a classic tactic of a cornered narcissist. Blame the process. When the facts are against you, attack the system that presents those facts." She paints herself as a victim of a corrupt process, a martyr for constitutional rights, rather than a convicted murderer. She conveniently ignores the mountain of evidence the state presented, and the fact that she chose to represent herself in parts of her trials, a disastrous decision that only further exposed her incompetence and detachment from reality. Then, her speech took a turn from the legal to the bizarrely celestial. She spoke of her near-death experience during Tylee's birth as proof of her special knowledge of the afterlife. Lori Vallow: "When our spirits leave our bodies, we instantly no longer feel hate, anger, jealousy, or resentment. I promise you, we come to Earth to experience these emotions, but these emotions are instantly replaced by a feeling of bliss, a heightened sense of peace, love, joy, and happiness." Do you hear what she is doing? She is, in a veiled way, justifying her crimes. She is implying that by killing her children, her husband, and Tammy Daybell, she was sending them to a better place, a place of bliss and peace. She is framing murder as an act of mercy. It is a grotesque and self-serving perversion of spirituality. She isn't talking about their terror, their pain, the duct tape, or the shallow graves. She is talking about a fantasy world she created to absolve herself of guilt. She also made a chillingly passive-aggressive statement to the families. Lori Vallow: "I want everyone to know I mourn with all of you. I am sorry for the pain. Losing your loved ones is painful. I feel it too. I feel it too." This is not an apology. This is a masterstroke of narcissistic gaslighting. She equates her loss, the consequences of her own actions, with the grief of the families whose loved ones she murdered. She is essentially saying, we're all victims here. It is an obscene and deeply insulting attempt to co-opt their grief and center herself in the narrative of suffering. The most telling part of her entire speech was her complete and utter lack of remorse. She stated, "If I were guilty of these crimes, I would admit it, and I would tell you how sorry I was." In her mind, she is innocent. Not because she didn't conspire to have these people killed, but because, in her twisted worldview, their deaths were justified. They were zombies. It was a necessary act. She has no remorse because she genuinely believes she did nothing wrong. This is a critical point to understand in the psychology of cult leaders and malignant narcissists. They create an alternate moral universe where their actions are not only acceptable, but righteous. We see this in figures like Charles Manson, who never saw himself as a murderer, but as a prophet instigating a necessary revolution. We see it in Jim Jones, who led over 900 people to their deaths in Jonestown, believing it was a noble, revolutionary act of suicide against a corrupt world. Lori Vallow operates from the same playbook. She is the hero of her own story, and everyone else is just a supporting character or an obstacle to be removed. Her speech ended with a quote from Scripture, a final, defiant assertion of her divine authority. She was, in essence, telling the judge and the victims that they would all have to answer to God one day, and on that day, she would be vindicated. After Lori's delusional monologue, it was the judge's turn. And Judge Justin Barresi did not hold back. He was respectful, but his words were like a battering ram against the fortress of Lori's fantasy. Judge Barresi began by methodically dismantling Lori's claims about the unfairness of the court. Judge Barresi. The defendant spent several minutes talking about statistics and being prevented from presenting her side of the story. And that's not true. When she says that she could not get a fair trial in Maricopa County, that is not true. He calmly and factually corrected her narrative, reestablishing the authority of the court and the integrity of the process. He refused to let her lies hang in the air unchallenged. Then, he moved from the procedural to the profound, addressing the true nature of her evil. You have left a trail of destruction that spans from Louisiana through Texas, Arizona, up to Idaho, and back again. The amount of forethought, calculation, planning, and manipulation that went into these crimes is unparalleled in my career. Your manipulative powers are profoundly destructive. Unparalleled in my career. Coming from an experienced judge, this statement carries immense weight. He is validating what we all see, that Lori Vallow is not an ordinary criminal. She is a master manipulator of a rare and dangerous kind. The judge then beautifully articulated the core of her methodology. Judge Barresi, you preyed upon the vulnerabilities of those around you, JJ, Tylee, Alex, Milani, and others. You specialized in exploiting the empathy and goodwill of others, turning those virtues into tools for control and harm. I think that over time, as a result of being manipulated by you, those people lost their own sense of self and their ability to discern truth from lies. This is a perfect description of narcissistic and cult-like abuse. The abuser isolates their victims, erodes their sense of reality, and makes them dependent on the abuser's version of the truth. The judge even speculates that Alex Cox, her own brother and enforcer, may have ultimately been another victim, dying under the abnormal burden you placed upon him. And then, the judge delivered the most profound blow. He took Lori's own religious weapon and turned it against her. Lori had quoted a scripture about prisoners being set free. The judge corrected her theology on the spot. Judge Barresi, you just referenced a Bible verse about prisoners will be set free. That is not a literal verse. That is a verse about people who accept Jesus can be in prison and they will be free when they die and go to heaven. But it will take the grace of God to grant you freedom. In summary, you should never be released from prison. This was the checkmate. He exposed her shallow, self-serving interpretation of Scripture and used a more sound theological point to seal her earthly fate. He was telling her, you can have your fantasy about heaven, but here on earth, you are done. He robbed her of her final weapon, her perverted faith. His final words before delivering the sentence were a haunting prediction. Judge Barresi, the cameras that you so desperately sought, the media requests will dwindle over time, and you will fade into obscurity. For a narcissist who craves the spotlight, this is the ultimate punishment. Not just prison, but irrelevance. To become a forgotten sideshow freak. Just as Kay Woodcock had described, the sentence was delivered. 2 life sentences. To be served consecutively to each other and consecutively to the 3 life sentences she is already serving in Idaho. There is no parole. There is no hope of freedom. Lori Vallow Daybell will die in prison. So what are the lessons here? What can we, as a society, take away from this horrifying saga? First, we must understand the profound danger of charismatic manipulators. Lori Vallow was not a monster in appearance. She was described as beautiful, charming, and magnetic. This is how predators operate. They don't announce their evil. They cloak it in charisma. They find people who are searching for answers, for community, for a sense of purpose, as people like her niece Milani or her brother Alex were, and they offer them a simple, compelling narrative. We must teach critical thinking and encourage healthy skepticism, especially when someone claims to have all the answers and demands absolute loyalty. Second, this case is a terrifying case study in how faith can be perverted into a tool of destruction. This is not an indictment of religion, but a warning about what happens when personal revelation is divorced from accountability, empathy, and basic human decency. Lori and Chad created a closed-off echo chamber where their own desires were relabeled as God's will. Any belief system that dehumanizes others, that labels people as dark or obstacles, is a red flag. True faith in any tradition should cultivate compassion, not contempt. Third, we see the incredible power of family and the persistence of love. If it weren't for the relentless efforts of Kay and Larry Woodcock, this case might never have gained the national attention it did. They refused to accept Lori's lies. They held press conferences, they kept JJ and Tylee's faces in the news, and they fought. Their fight for their grandson became a fight for the truth, and their victory is a testament to the fact that even in the face of unspeakable evil, the love for a child can be an unstoppable force. Finally, this case is a stark reminder of the red flags of narcissistic abuse, the gaslighting, convincing others their reality is wrong, the constant need for admiration, the profound lack of empathy, the sense of entitlement, and the willingness to exploit others for personal gain. Lori Vallow is an extreme example, but these traits exist on a spectrum. By understanding them, we can better protect ourselves and our loved ones from the kinds of manipulation that, while they may not end in murder, can still cause profound emotional and psychological destruction. Lori Vallow's story is a modern American Gothic, a tale of sex, money, and murder wrapped in a veneer of piety. She saw herself as a goddess, a queen preparing for a new world. But in the end, the system she so despised, the families she so callously destroyed, and the truth she tried so hard to bury, all converged in a single room to deliver a final, inescapable judgment. She is not a goddess. She is not a prophet. She is, as Larry Woodcock so simply and powerfully stated, a murderer. And she will spend the rest of her days fading into the obscurity she fears most, confined to an 8x6 cell, a monument to her own monstrous ego.